Today's video is an overview of METIS. METIS is a fast-growing Ethereum Layer 2 rollup with some exciting developments in the near future, including a decentralized sequencer, as well as a large ecosystem fund. Welcome back to Dynamo DeFi. My name is Patrick. In today's video, we're going to talk about what METIS is, how to start using it, the tokenomics of the METIS token, and then some risks and opportunities with METIS right now. Before we go any further, as a quick reminder, nothing in this video is financial advice. This is solely intended for educational purposes, and I'm not suggesting that you do or do not buy any crypto assets. Now, let's get into the video. To start, let's talk about what exactly METIS is. METIS is an Ethereum Layer 2 rollup. That basically means that from a user perspective, it feels like a separate chain. However, it ultimately settles onto Ethereum, so it inherits some of Ethereum's security properties. Other Layer 2s that you might be familiar with are Arbitrum, Optimism, and Coinbase's base chain. One thing I'll note is that unlike those other chains I just mentioned, METIS does not use ETH to pay for transactions. So on Arbitrum, you use ETH to pay for transactions just like on Ethereum. However, on METIS, you actually use METIS's own native METIS token to pay for transactions. So slight difference there. It has some other interesting things as well that do make it different from these other Layer 2s. For one thing, they have a focus on building infrastructure for decentralized organizations. One of my theses for the crypto market over the next few years is that you're going to see the first real on-chain businesses developing, and we're already starting to see that. And these are going to be businesses that don't rely on crypto traders or crypto speculation. They're just true organizations, businesses, companies that function wholly or partially on-chain. And METIS is building infrastructure to actually run companies and decentralized organizations on-chain. They also have a very extensive ecosystem. Some other Layer 2s do as well, but I would say that METIS is among the top Layer 2s in terms of how developed their ecosystem is. You can just see some of the many projects that are on METIS listed here on their website. And then they also have a very strong team. They have multiple experienced co-founders. And then what's also interesting is that this member of their team, Natalia, you may not know who she is, but you probably know who her son is. And her son is Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum itself. So although there's no official partnership as far as I'm aware of, the fact that the mother of the founder of Ethereum is working on this project, to me, is a good sign that this project is aligned with Ethereum's ultimate scaling and future visions. And so I think that that's a pretty compelling case for it. Something else that's exciting about METIS right now is they have a few very big events coming in Q1 of 2024. To start, they are launching a $100 million ecosystem fund. And as we've seen in the past, when this happens, when, for example, in 2021, Avalanche launched an ecosystem fund, and there's been many other chains that have launched ecosystem funds since then, that can actually do a lot to accelerate the growth of its ecosystem, because you're basically providing monetary incentives for people to start using applications, or in some cases for developers to actually build more applications in the ecosystem. So they've got all that capital, and they are deploying it in the form of METIS tokens starting next year. And those are going to go to sequencer mining, retroactive funding, and deployment of new projects and other endeavors. Now, one thing I want to zero in on here is the sequencer mining, because that's the second major development, is that they are decentralizing their sequencer. The sequencer is the infrastructure that ultimately writes transactions to settle them onto Ethereum. And one of the major criticisms of Layer 2s up until now has been that those sequencers typically are not decentralized, meaning that the Layer 2, although it maybe inherits some of Ethereum's properties, ultimately it's not decentralized like Ethereum is, because the sequencer itself is often still controlled by a few parties, sometimes a single multi-sig, or another small centralized group of actors. Well, METIS is aiming to change that by decentralizing their sequencer, and as part of that, you'll be able to actually stake METIS and receive funds for sequencer mining. So that's quite exciting, and I think that could be a major catalyst for the METIS ecosystem. If given all this, you want to try METIS, here's how you can get started. first thing you'll need to do is actually bridge over to METIS. And the official METIS bridge is bridge.metis.io. And the network for METIS is actually called the Andromeda Network. So if you see that anywhere, know that it's METIS Andromeda Network or just Andromeda Network. That's what Andromeda is. But the thing is, because they don't use ETH as a gas token, because they use METIS as a gas token, I would actually recommend not using the METIS bridge, because unless you bridge over a lot, I think it's over $100, maybe even several $100, you get a little bit of METIS. But unless you do that, you're not going to get any METIS, so you won't be able to spend any transaction. You won't be able to do any transactions once you get there, unless you actually bridge over METIS itself. But what I would use is I would use Synapse. And by the way, I'm making a second video on how to actually bridge to METIS. This video is likely going to be out first, but as soon as that tutorial on bridging to METIS is out, I'll link that down in the description. But I'd recommend using Synapse, and Synapse lets you bridge any token over, or many tokens. I mean, not literally any token, but pretty much any major token you can bridge over, and then it will convert some of that token to METIS so you can pay for your initial transaction. And once you've bridged over, you are ready to start using the METIS DeFi ecosystem. As we can see here in DeFi Llama, they have a very developed ecosystem, dozens of projects. However, most of them are relatively small. So I'm not going to go through most of these simply because they're too small. However, to highlight a few, if you want to make trades on METIS, the largest DEX right now is Hermes by MayaDAO. MayaDAO has several different DeFi projects in the METIS ecosystem, but their flagship project is Hermes, which is a decentralized exchange that you can use to swap. You can provide liquidity, etc., etc. And yeah, so the first thing you probably want to do is you probably want to swap either to METIS or swap METIS for other things, or provide liquidity to start earning some yield. Another protocol that you might find interesting is Aave. Aave is the leading money market in all of crypto, and they're also deployed on METIS. So for example, if you wanted to bridge over ETH and then provide that ETH as collateral to borrow funds and then use those same funds to buy METIS or to participate in METIS DeFi, you can do that with Aave. All right, now let's talk a bit about the METIS Tokenomics. METIS token has come up quite a bit recently. As of the time I'm making this video, it sits at just under $85 with a market cap of $401 million. Now, one thing to note here is the fully diluted valuation is over $800 million, meaning that most of the METIS tokens are not in circulation yet. That being said, it has nearly 50% in circulation, so I personally wouldn't consider this ratio to be something that is particularly concerning. Next, let's take a quick look at METIS token distribution and unlock schedule. If you look at the initial distribution, you can see that the bulk of it, 48%, was transaction mining, then 9% for community, 7% for founding team, 7% for the private round, 6% for an airdrop, 6% for liquidity reserves. You have 6% for seed investors, and then smaller amounts for various other things. And I would say this is not a bad distribution. I mean, transaction mining is basically half of it. Then you've got community, and it's actually relatively small percent, easily less than half, that goes towards these, what you might call insiders. And it's perfectly reasonable for tokens to have an allocation to insiders, right? I mean, they have to pay the founding team. They need seed funds, so it's perfectly reasonable to have those people in the allocation. And the thing I would note here is that actually, except for the transaction mining, all of those tokens are already unlocked, meaning that you don't have early investors, you don't have these seed round investors who are just waiting to dump on you as soon as they come unlocked, because this token launched in 2021. These tokens have been unlocking over years. Yes, some of those early investors may still be holding and they may be up. However, they would have had to hold while it was unlocked, potentially for multiple years now. So I don't personally view that as a major concern. One thing you might have noticed here is that it says 72% of METIS tokens are unlocked. However, if you go over here to CoinGecko, you can see that fewer than half are already in circulating supply. How is this possible? Basically, unlocked and circulating supply aren't exactly the same thing, because you can have unlocked tokens that are, for example, in a treasury of the DAO for a chain, or otherwise in some sort of community reserve or community fund for the chain. that are unlocked. They can be put into circulation, but they're not actually in circulation yet, either because the team hasn't decided to release them or because they need to be released by a governance vote. And that's the case for METIS. For example, this $100 million fund, those are coming from tokens that are unlocked. If they were locked, they wouldn't be able to be used in a fund. However, they're not yet in circulation. As far as value accrual for METIS itself, it functions similarly to any other chain's token. It's used to pay for transactions, which I believe is one of the best utilities in crypto because anyone who uses the chain has to hold at least some METIS. It also is used in METIS DeFi. All these applications I showed you before, like Hermes, like these many applications on DeFi Llama, they're basically all going to incorporate the METIS token in some form, either in liquidity pools or as collateral or in another function. And that creates a lot of demand for the token because people using the protocol have to purchase METIS. And then finally, once this decentralized sequencer launches and those sequencer mining funds roll out, you will be able to stake METIS for yield as well. And that's another powerful utility. Finally, let's talk about some of the risks and opportunities with METIS. To start, we'll talk about the opportunities. And I would say the major opportunities right now are this ecosystem fund and decentralized sequencer launch. There's been so much scrutiny on whether layer 2s are really decentralized that I think METIS launching their decentralized sequencer could be and already is a major catalyst for the METIS ecosystem. Furthermore, this $100 million fund is both an opportunity to bid on METIS ecosystem coins and METIS itself, and also could be an opportunity to earn some nice yields yourself if you can take advantage of protocols that are passing on those funds to users. Another opportunity that I see with METIS is that if you look at the TVL of various rollups, then you can see that METIS still has a lot of room to grow. It has around $63 million, which is very low compared to something like Arbitrum, Optimism, or even Base. And if this ecosystem fund can attract users from other layer 2s, or perhaps even from Ethereum mainnet itself, then that is a ton of liquidity that could enter the METIS ecosystem. What about risks with METIS? First risk that I would say is counterintuitively, this $100 million fund, keep in mind those are new METIS tokens that could be entering circulation in the near future. And so if it's not enough to successfully incentivize new liquidity, then it could lead to dilution of current METIS holders. Another risk that I would point out is that while the low TVL is currently an opportunity, it's also a risk that despite being around for several years, METIS has been unable to gain or keep the traction of some of these other ecosystems like Arbitrum and Optimism. If you look on L2Beat, for example, then you can see that $9 billion of funds have been uploaded to Arbitrum. However, only $660 million have been uploaded to METIS. And I believe that part of the reason for that, this is just a suspicion, but I believe part of the reason for that is that METIS doesn't use ETH as the gas token. And I also view that as a risk because I think there are many people from the Ethereum community who, for better or worse, are more comfortable using a chain that uses ETH as the gas token. Another risk I would note is that L2Beat here identifies several aspects of METIS's security that either require work or are still in development. To keep on top of the latest trends in crypto, I also publish a newsletter every week at dynamodefi.substack.com. Here I talk about trends and narratives, on-chain analysis, tools to help you with your crypto research, and upcoming events. Again, the website is dynamodefi.substack.com. And if you want more videos like this one, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Dynamo DeFi.